it's counting. Okay, that's good. All right.
Great. Thank you for having us. I'm going to do a little bit of a civics background, simply because what we have learned over the years is that there are different languages with different fields. And the legal field incorporates a lot of words that your layperson just doesn't hear on the daily in their lives. So when we talk to people, we want to make sure they understand the language we're speaking. And you all probably speak health law or health care, which I don't speak. So we do overlap a little bit when we get to the mental health. And Lisa and I will talk about that a little later. So first of all, just to start, again, way back, you probably got this in high school. You may even be taking some government type classes here that you hear these words. But the origin of indigent defense really goes all the way back to the beginning of the country and starts in the Constitution. In the Sixth Amendment, even the Fifth Amendment, you're going to read about the rights of people when they are accused. Then fast forward a little bit, you're going to get a Supreme Court case, and it's called Gideon versus Wainwright. We'll have a little more detail coming up. And then finally, the Texas state laws that have been enacted by our legislature include laws about indigent defense. So first is the Sixth Amendment, and I've highlighted just the most important part for our purposes. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused person shall enjoy the right to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So just very basic. If you're accused of committing a crime, you have the right to have a lawyer help you. So notice what that doesn't say. That does not say you have to pay for the lawyer or you can have a free lawyer. It doesn't say whether you're guilty or innocent. It's just any accusation qualifies you. And they did not really think about how to pay for this yet, okay? So that comes up later. So Gideon versus Wainwright is a landmark case out of our United States Supreme Court from 1963. Mr. Gideon, his first name was Clarence. I think he was in his 50s, and he was accused of breaking into a pool hall. I don't remember if he stole something, or allegedly, or if he just messed it up, but he was essentially charged with some crime related to breaking into this pool hall. And he went to court, he asked the judge for a lawyer because he was not sophisticated enough to represent himself. I believe he had an 8th grade education. The lawyer said, no, I'm not gonna give you a lawyer. If you can't afford one, too bad. So Mr. Gideon went to trial, and what do you think happened? He lost, that's right. He got convicted and he's sentenced to a term of imprisonment, but he did not give up. He kept fighting, and there are layers. The trial court is the first layer, but if you lose there, you can appeal to a higher court, and that keeps going until you get to the United States Supreme Court. So he made it all the way there, and he won in the United States Supreme Court. And so my favorite things that they said are reason and reflection require us to recognize that if the fact that government hires lawyers to prosecute and defendants who have the money hire lawyers to defend are the strongest indications of the widespread belief that lawyers in criminal cases are necessities, not luxuries. The right of one charged with crime to counsel may not be deemed fundamental and essential to fair trials in some countries, but it is in ours. So there it is. The Supreme Court says everybody gets a lawyer whether you can afford one or not. So what that means is they're saying somebody in government has to pay for a free lawyer when people like Mr. Gideon cannot afford it. So moving on to the state law, the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure is one of the books that Lisa and I have to refer to all the time. You guys, if you do health-related law, you will have to look at a lot of books as well. Even as you practice, we can't know it all. There's a lot of law. So the origin of the indigent defense in Texas starts with the first article, Article 1, where it says that indigent defendants are entitled to have an attorney appointed to represent them in any adversary judicial proceeding if it will result in confinement. So if you get a speeding ticket, you are not entitled to a lawyer because that does not come with the potential potential punishment of confinement. It's fine only, it's just money. Then we move on to the judges of the county court will basically come up with the procedures to use to appoint counsel. And these are really dense and complicated. You don't have any interest in that, but nonetheless, it gives the judges of the local jurisdiction the power and the responsibility to come up with the policies. And then next, it says that any counsel that is appointed is entitled to be paid a reasonable attorney's fee. It says except for public defender's offices, and that's because the format of a public defender's office is that they are county employees and get paid a salary. So they're being paid, they're just not being paid by the case. So we can talk about the structure of that later, but the essential issue here is that an attorney that is providing the service must be paid. And then finally, the county that is prosecuting the person accused is also responsible for making those payments. And those payments have to come out of the general fund of the county. Then we go to what is effective representation. You see that referred to in Gideon versus Wainwright and throughout our laws. It's complicated. In fact, it's a lot more complicated than many lawyers doing the work think it is. I think I screenshot just a few of the things, but this basically is from the Texas State Bar, which is our organization that we're required to be members of to maintain our license. And they have put together guidelines just for this narrow area of the law, indigent defense in criminal cases. And it is quite detailed. So we won't get into the nitty gritty, but basically we have to come in and check the work of the accusing authority, which would be law enforcement, and then check the work of the prosecuting authority, which in Nueces County is the district attorney's office. And then when we go to court, we have to make sure that the judges are doing things in a fair way. And those guidelines kind of spell out what steps to take to make sure that we are checking the work of everyone around us. And then we'll go to why I do this, and I believe that Lisa is motivated similarly. Michael Morton is a household name for criminal lawyers. I know you guys have probably never heard of him. He did write a book, and I cannot remember the name of it, but you could find it if you're interested after this pretty easily by just typing in Michael Morton, Texas Innocence. So Mr. Morton, back in 1987, was in his early 30s, was married, had a little boy, I think he was 3 or 4 years old, and his wife was found murdered in their bed one morning, bludgeoned to death. It's a very bloody scene. Little boy was home, wandering around. Michael was at work. He was a grocery store manager. Well, the police honed in on Michael. They decided that Michael was guilty because he had left a note for his wife making some comment about how he regretted the fact that she had not been willing to you-know-what the night before, which had been his birthday. And then he ended it with, "I love you." Well, the police's theory was he was so angry that she would not engage in hanky-panky with him that he killed her. And so they arrest him, they charge him with murder, and there are some things that happen in the processing of this scene and in the preparation of this case that later came to light but did not at the time. So I don't remember if I snipped some of it there. Okay, so yeah, here we go. The day after his wife's body was found, the police did recover a bloody bandana found at a construction site near their home. His wife's mother told the police that their little boy had been present during the murder, and the little boy told them that it was not his dad that did it, but a monster. He described the crime scene and specifically said Daddy was not home. The neighbors told the police that there was a man who had been parking a green van on the street behind the Morton's home and had walked off into a nearby wooded area, and that Mrs. Morton's missing credit card had been possibly recovered in a San Antonio, Texas Texas jewelry store. This all happened in the North Austin area. But none of this information was provided to Michael or his attorneys. They didn't know any of this when they went to trial. So guess what happened? Michael lost. He was convicted, and he spent 24 years in prison as a convicted murderer. So in 2005, the Innocence Project and a volunteer law firm got involved. And essentially, the thing that broke the case was that bloody bandana that they never knew about finally got tested. And they were able to detect that Christine's blood was on the handkerchief or the bandana, but also the DNA of an unknown person. And they eventually were able to track down that person, and it was a man who used to drive a van in that neighborhood. He was some sort of a worker. And here's the real tragedy here. That man killed another woman 2 years after he killed Christine, and while Michael was sitting in prison for not having killed his wife. So this is the part that animates me, you know? I mean, avoiding having anybody else go through what Michael went through and what his son went through. You know, his son's real life experience was that his father was in prison for killing his mother, and he didn't know for over 20 years that that wasn't true. So destroyed their relationship. I think they've reconciled now, but you know, it'll never be the way it could have been. And all of that was based on what? Maybe sloppiness, laziness, maybe intentional misconduct, I don't know. But I don't want this to happen to people. So that's why I do the work I do. And there are many of these cases. So if you look at the Innocence Project of Texas, they'll give you statistics. And just in Texas, our local Innocence Project has exonerated over 40 people. And exoneration means not just were they wrongfully convicted, but they were proven to be actually innocent. And so they predict that, I think there's about, I didn't screenshot that one, they think that 1 to 2% of all the people in prison are innocent, based on the numbers of people that they've been able to later prove are innocent. And if that's true, then there are thousands of people right now in our Texas prisons that don't belong there. And some of the statistics are that 72% of the convictions that have been overturned through DNA testing, right? So something that you know for sure now who did it because you have DNA, there was an eyewitness in 72 of those cases that said, I saw this person commit the crime. So it's something that we've learned in the past decade or so, is that eyewitness testimony is very unreliable. And yet, it's very compelling, right? If you're in court and you hear someone say they know for sure, you're probably going to think that's pretty compelling. In 61% of the exonerations, there are lying jailhouse informants, snitches, right? Who are obviously highly motivated to give testimony because they typically get some sort of a benefit for doing that. But their testimony has been found to be so unreliable that it has resulted in false convictions, and 61% of the exonerations also included the false allegation by a jailhouse snitch. And yet research also shows that juries are very affected by jailhouse informants. They believe them. They think they're credible, generally. 57% of defendants who were later exonerated, those cases included official misconduct, meaning somebody cheated along the way. And then forensic methods presented as fact at trial, such as the firearm tool mark analysis and shoe print, have been used in 23% of the cases and then later found to not be actual scientific evidence. Like, we were relying on the wrong kind of science. And then finally, 12% of crimes that people were exonerated of included a confession. So imagine that. You are finally proven to be innocent, and yet you confess. So that's a whole nother talk, false confessions. Very interesting. So the innocence concept, like I said, animates me. I don't want anyone to be living in a jail cell if they don't belong there. But even when someone has actually committed a crime, I also feel like it's important to minimize the harm that's done to that person. And the reason I believe that is because of this concept. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And what our criminal system does is it identifies people by the worst thing they've ever done. And they then have like the scarlet letter. They are harmed immeasurably for, something that may have taken 15 minutes of their entire life. We don't really pay attention to everything else. And so in our work as criminal defense lawyers, what we try to do is tell the more complete story about the person. And if they committed a crime, there should be consequences, but the consequences should match that person's entire story and the actual act, rather than labeling them and throwing them away forever because of one thing that they did wrong. So those are the reasons that I'm in the work, and I've known Lisa for a long time. We talk about this all the time, so I'm confident in saying that she is motivated by the same things. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit about how we came to be involved in this public defender's office and knowing your teacher, Dr. Owens.
So, again, my name is Lisa Greenberg. I'm a local criminal defense lawyer, and I love saying that. I love my job. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. I absolutely love my job. I was going to ask you guys, why do you do what you do? Why are you here? Anybody want to tell me why you're studying what you study? What motivates you? I'm nice. I promise. You can talk to me.
I would say, I just like helping people and making people, feel better. And
I
feel
knew
like
you were going to say that. I could tell.
I feel like as a nurse, people in their worst circumstances, I can put, some happiness in their life, I guess.
Same, okay? Same, but we're going to get to that. Tell me, anybody else, why are you here? Why are you here studying what you study? Anybody? To make a difference. Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm hoping I can bridge the gap because we really do kind of be the same. So I know Janice and I both, we started as DAs. And so what happens is you graduate from law school, and for me, I'm assuming Janice too, I had a bunch of offers, right? And so the district attorney's office where I grew up had starting jobs. And you could get some of your loans paid back, or we just needed a job. I was out of law school, and I went into it believing that I was doing justice, okay? I thought I'm going to do justice for these people, crimes have been committed against them. And I started as a family violence prosecutor. There was a new family violence unit that started. So I was going to tell everybody how they should live, that they should be married, how they should raise their kids. I was not married. I didn't have any kids. But I was the best judge of how everybody else should live their life. And they should just do this. And I don't and I realized, I thought at that time that was justice. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that. There is a place for that. Later, life happened. I always like to tell people I got married, and the interesting thing that people tend to find interesting is my husband's in law enforcement, okay? I'm a criminal defense lawyer. And we both believe in justice, but he also believes in what I do. So what happened was I had babies, and to put my babies in preschool, I could work at the DA's office and pick them up at 5 o'clock and make enough money to just, preschool, and then they'd have to stay there. So I decided, well, no, I'm going to go on my own. I started taking court-appointed cases. Court-appointed cases are when somebody does not have the money to get a lawyer, okay? So I took my Fox News reporter-looking self into the jail in Oasis County, and I met somebody charged with crime. And this woman, I think this woman was charged, my first case was a prostitution case. She was charged with prostitution, and she explained to me how she had no job. She had been convicted before because nobody helped her, so she had no means to get a job, and she was just trying to make her way. But what she did in that moment was she handed me her life. And I was 30, 31, and she said, here, just fix it, fix it. Some, maybe kind of like you, in a different way, right? She handed me her life, and I remember being like, why do you want me to fix your life? Like, I'm a mess. Like, seriously, you're trusting me? But she did. She trusted me. Do your thing. So I remember being so inspired by that. Like, nobody's listened to this lady. She hasn't had a chance. The lawyer who had her before just pled her, got her a deal. And when you plead somebody guilty, when you mark them, it's very hard to get out of that. And so I started to love what I do. Fast forward a little bit, started to get some big noteworthy cases, and didn't just have court-appointed cases. But every time I had a court-appointed case, I'm going to tell you, most of the time, I don't know how you guys feel, but people always ask me, like, do you ever have somebody who's super guilty? Or I can tell you in my career, I think I've been doing this like 15 years. The amount of people I have that I represent that I think are actually evil or bad, I really maybe one, and it was like some rich kid who didn't take, he was entitled and he didn't want to accept what he had done. Most of the time I think it's people who have not been listened to, who have mental health problems, who have never been heard. So I want to tell you that for a reason. So I started to feel that way. And I had these cases where there was always an underlying mental health condition. Well, who doesn't get treated for mental health? Mostly people, so you see this word indigent defense, that means poor. People without means, okay? Most of the time, people without means just do the best they can. Mom and dad are working, they may not have insurance, you know. I know all the people I grew up with, they're pretty privileged, like they said, I have anxiety, I have ADHD. But you don't hear people who really might have issues have diagnoses. So when they go to jail, they typically get a court-appointed lawyer. And some court-appointed lawyers are good, and some court-appointed lawyers are terrible. Some people make their money off the court-appointed wheel, and they just plead people. Like, if you are $1,000 for your case, why wouldn't I take 50 of them and just roll them? I'll plead you, I'll plead you, I'll plead you, and they don't see the person, okay? And so I hated that. And I had a lot of mental health cases. I'm going to tell you about one in particular, and then I'm going to bridge this gap right here, because I can talk to you about it. I had a case of a young man in San Patricia County who killed his father and burned the house down. And what was very interesting about the case was the mom came in the office. And she told me the story of her son. And she said, about 18 years old, he started having mental health problems, but we didn't know. All of a sudden, he just was very sort of arrogant, cocky, but he thought everybody was hating on him. He started to get paranoid. And he started to do like little things. We noticed getting in fights at parties, okay? Then he went away to school. He was smart enough to go to college. He had a soccer scholarship. He was a beautiful, handsome boy. He still is, but he just started to deteriorate. And then he started to do weird things at the house, like he would turn the pictures over at the house. He would cover the mirrors. He got really obsessed with the Bible. And he was over 18 years old, so mom kept taking him to get to see, you know, counselors, psychologists, but he didn't have to go. He didn't think that he had any problems. He ran off, they couldn't find him, he started preaching to people in the streets, and he kind of became obsessed with religiosity, you know, the devil, God, and anyhow, he started to think people were out to get him. His parents kept trying to have him committed. He would go to the hospital for 2 days, they would release him back to the streets. So one day the parents pick him up, they take him home, and he had decided that his parents were evil. They slept separate from him, they didn't know what to do, but they had tried every avenue they could. And he knocked on the door, came in, fought with the father, killed his father, he burned the house down. And the mom sat there, like she called the police, she fought him, she did everything she could, but she lost her husband. And this mom came into my office and she said to me, I want you to save my son's life, because he charged with capital murder, and absolutely he did this, but he was never helped, and I don't want to throw my son away. So, long story short, they arrest this kid. He wasn't mine yet. He sat in the jail in San Patricio County with no medicine for over 2 years. Okay? Then they deemed him incompetent to stand trial. The reason he sat there for 2 years with no meds is you don't get meds in the jail. Okay? He sat there screaming, getting beat up by guards because he's praying too loud, not knowing what he had done. Finally, he gets sent off to a hospital where they say he's incompetent to stand trial. Then they give him meds. Well, what happens when he gets medicated? His brain becomes lucid, and he realizes he's killed his father for the first time. He comes back home. He has to live with that. And anyhow, nobody had looked at his mental health. The police aren't trained in mental health. They are trained to look at, like, it was probably a slam dunk case. Like, he's burned the house down. He's standing on top of the house as it burns down with a bicycle. They didn't look at mental health. But what we had to do was find his journal, show the struggle, show how he tried to get help, and talk to the DA's office. What happened in that case was we did so much work, and looking into his mental health, that they agreed he was insane at the time of the offense, and they sent him to the hospital, where he now is. And I tell you that story for a reason, because I'm going to get back to that on that case. But lots of times, they originally he had a public defender who didn't know about mental health. We're not taught about mental health in law school. All of us probably need trainings. I need mental health. Like, I mean, we are all like these lawyers with these big egos, but we are not taught what you guys, the aspect you have. If we're smart enough to turn to you and ask for help and say, help me understand this person, we can bridge that gap. But there was a big hole. Okay, so I tell you that for a reason. Dennis and I we're buddies. I like her, and she really is a true hero. She's not going to brag on herself, but I'll tell you about her in a minute. But we used to sit in the courtroom and watch these court-appointed attorneys lead people. And we could tell they had mental health problems. They would just put it on their tab. Like, if somebody has a mental health problem, the DA would go, okay, I'll do 5 years probation, here, and we can move it, right? What are you going to do? You're going to punish the mental health out of them? You're going to throw them in prison? A lot of times drug cases are people with mental health problems, self-medicate. Let's throw them in prison, right? That's going to fix it. People don't have the time to look. And Janice and I would sit in the back of the courtroom, and we would just watch it. Judges appointed people who had moved cases. People who moved cases probably didn't, not all of them, but a lot of them didn't care about the person they were pleading. We'd get so sad. And we'd say, we want this public defender's office. But who are we? You know? These two, like she always says, two random ladies like just sitting there being like, we want a public defender's office, start one, you know, and who's gonna listen to us? We didn't have any power, we didn't have any money. But we kept asking for it, Something happened in 2020 with COVID, where people started to realize mental health was a real thing. And so we get this call like, weren't y'all interested in a mental health public defender's office or a public defender's office? So we were like, yes, you know, and so Judge Maderi called us and we started building it, but we didn't ever think it would really happen. We never thought this would happen. Nueces County, Corpus Christi, Texas, has never had a public defender's office. I don't know if y'all are from here. I don't know where y'all are from, but every major city has a public defender's office, okay? That means that they're not paid by the case. They're paid to take care of these people. Well, we kept pushing for one. And they wanted it focused on mental health. And so what started as kind of this dream, it took a lot of work and a lot of begging and a lot of kissing butt with people with power and saying, oh, yeah, the stuff we don't like to do, but we did it. And it actually became a reality. And then when we got the funding, which is kind of, I'll ignore all of that, Dennis and I looked at each other. I think the judge said, which of you's leading this office? And I said, not me.
Just pointed at each other.
And we did. And Dennis said, I'll do it. Okay. Then we had to get a board of people. Well, did we want people on boards? On boards, you guys know, like administrations or whatever. I don't know what you could think of, where they have board of trustees, board of trustees, they have power, they have these, blah, blah, blah. We didn't want that. We wanted real people who knew what it was like to be in healthcare, to have mental health problems in their family. We wanted people who would care to make this a great office in Oasis County. Every time you turn on the news, there's bad news about our county, right? Like this scandal and whatever. We were like, nah, we're gonna have real people who this has affected. So we started asking. So we asked Dr. Owen. She's on our board. We asked the mother who came to me with her son, whose son had killed his father. I said, I want you on my board. We asked other mothers who had kids with mental illness. We put people who are in power but understand the plight of people with mental health, people who care. And we have this board of people who really care. And it's actually, and Janice runs it, and she has a beautiful staff. And we have these lawyers in there that actually care about people, that actually listen to them. And not only do they work to get them out of jail, y'all might think, oh, your job is just to get that person off. People with mental health illness come in and out of the criminal justice system, okay? What happens is, they're let out of the jail, they might be homeless, they might be drug addicted, they might have mental health issues that have never been treated, and they let them out and they just expect them to go get better, go on now. And they just keep coming back in. These people put them in touch with resources, services, mental health treatment, healthcare treatment. Some of them have never had healthcare treatment. So this is like the greatest thing. I mean, I've done some things, and she runs this office, but I always think when I die, I want somebody to talk about the mental health public defender's office, because it really helps people. And they also get resources with doctors and nurses and people in the mental health industry to come evaluate people, to give them medicine, to all the things that, you know, we don't think about. And so we're very proud of the mental health public defender's office. I just oversee it now, because I said, go ahead, Dennis, do your thing, and I'll just help you. I just help, you know, get the things they need. But it is just amazing, and I want you guys to know about it, how it started, and that Dr. Owens is part of it. I'm not just here to tell you that. It really is probably one of the greatest things we've ever done. And I also want you guys to know, when you think about careers in healthcare, our job really is to help people in criminal defense. It's a different way. But we also need you all. I'm no doctor, I'm no nurse, I'm no, you know, I have no idea other than the law. But people that we see every single day have healthcare issues, both mental health and physical health. They have pain. Some people who have drug cases have pain, you know, and they don't have the means to get medicated. They don't have, you know, all the things, right? Insurance and, you know, health really is, unfortunately, sometimes for those with means. Health, medicine, things that can make you feel better. But if you don't have those things, it's hard for you, right? So there is a bridge there. I don't know if all of that made sense to you, but when I was listening to Janice talk about it, I wanted you guys to know how important you are to us and to seeing the person and helping.
I have two examples I can show.
Show 'em.
Two of our cases. So when we talk about the neat thing about the public defender's office is we have two social workers on staff who are the experts in the mental health field, and they've also helped me connect with other services and, you know, healthcare providers that do serve the indigent population. Whereas if you're just an independent lawyer, you don't have the means to go look for all those resources. But because we are a county department with county funding, and we have salaries, and we have social workers with salaries, we are doing that work. And so here's an example of somebody who comes through the criminal legal system. We're calling him Lenny. Okay? Very first time he came into, hold on, I think I missed a step. Okay. Oh, never mind, wrong guy. Okay, Lenny, he comes into jail. and says, you know what, we can go ahead and do a plea of guilty. You know, you were incompetent, but hey, now I think we can put you on probation. Probation is its own nightmare, but he puts him on probation for like 5 years. There's never any competency about that. So Lenny gets out and he is working with the probation department, and probation notices Lenny is not really able to do probation. So they refer him to our local mental health authority, who recognizes Lenny because they've been working with Lenny since he was 2, because Lenny has an IQ of 48. Okay? Our cutoff is round about 70 for whether you're intellectually disabled. That's the new term for what we used to call mentally retarded. If you're below 70, you're presumptively intellectually disabled. He's a 48. Okay? So they reach out to my office and say, hey, this guy's on probation. He's never going to make it. What can we do? And so what we did is we worked with our local mental health authority, which is called MHID, to figure out what can we do to avoid Lenny getting into trouble. Oh, and by the way, his crime, it was a felony because it was assault on a pregnant person because his sister was pregnant, and he and his sister got into a tussle at home. You know, he's not out in society being a menace. He and his sister, and she knows he's intellectually disabled, but the police chose to charge that crime. So what ended up happening was our local health authority was able to facilitate a group home for him to live in, and that's where he still lives. This all was resolved about a year ago. Okay, so it's just an example of how coming through the criminal legal system, the lawyer just does the legal part. They're not really paying attention to what could be underlying and what a real solution could be. The next one is Charlie. So Charlie was in jail for 465 days the first time. His attorney was appointed, and misdemeanor charges, those are low-level charges, were filed 90 days after he was arrested. By the way, the law says he should have been released 30 days later, but he was not. 436 days after the arrest, finally, the lawyer says he may not be competent, and he files those same initiation of proceedings documents. And then 29 days later, the case was dismissed. So he was in jail for 465 days, and ultimately the state decided we don't even care about this case, so we're going to dismiss it. He was free for 18 days. Then he was arrested again, an attorney appointed, charges filed 80 days later after he sits there. That attorney also initiates competency proceeding. He waits for 491 days to go to a state hospital for competency services. So he goes to the state hospital, spends 134 days there, and the doctor there determines, you know what, we're not going to be able to make him competent because he actually has a brain disorder that is not fixable. It's like dementia. So there's no going back for him. This is who he is. He cannot understand. So he comes back to jail from the state hospital and waits 406 days for anything else to happen, even though everyone in the system knew he has this brain disorder, which is untreatable as far as competency goes. So he awaits disposition of his case and is finally released after those 406 days, but with no plan, just released. And what's interesting about Charlie is what he did when he was released from jail is he went and sat on the bench outside the jail. So he was free for 41 days until the police got tired of seeing him on the bench, and they arrested him for criminal trespass in the middle of the night and put him in jail. The next month, he was arrested 11 times for sitting on the same bench for criminally trespassing at the courthouse in the jail. But he would be released right away because by now the jail judges knew who he was, and they knew he wasn't a danger and that there was nothing the system could do, so they would release him on a very low bond, let him out, but he went right back to his bench. So we finally got appointed around that 11th arrest instead of a private lawyer. Our office, the public defender's office, got appointed. And we worked with, COC means continuity of care, which is a meeting that I have with mental health and medical professionals folks in the criminal legal system. And we all got together and tried to figure out what can we do, because Charlie has no family, and he's just rotting away in jail, basically. And so once we got him medically stable with his physical issues, then our local mental health authority helped him apply for and get benefits because he is disabled with his brain disorder, and he is now living in a nursing home. And he has not been in our jail. At the time I did this, which is about 2 months ago, he had not been in our jail for 230 days. So that is the happiest ending for Charlie that could have been, but not without him sitting in a concrete cell for a couple years. That's the difference, the level.
So I guess I want to turn over to you. I know you guys, how many of you guys watch Law and Order, SVU, all the things? Mostly, yeah. It's very different than what you see on TV. Every time I pick a jury, they say, I love Olivia Benson. I love Olivia Benson. You're going to be kind of disappointed because we don't have that here. But I think that there is a very, I think that in many ways, these two fields, like probably none of you thought anything about criminal law when you walked in here today, but criminal law and healthcare can be closely aligned, okay? We have to see the person. And not only do we see the person, they're charged, when somebody comes in my office, I just want to give you a brief idea, but I had somebody, here's an example, somebody charged with murder, and the police kept saying, well, he was weird, he didn't make eye contact when we talked to him, he just had odd behaviors. So this case was he was asleep at his friend's house, he woke up, his friend was dead, basically, okay? So they thought he did it, he's weird, he doesn't make eye contact. So I meet the guy, he comes to my office, he's charged with murder. I look at him, I'm like, yeah, he's kind of weird. He doesn't make eye contact, he's a little odd, like. But then I start asking questions, and I see the way he answers, and I ask him, and he's in his 50s, okay? You're on the spectrum? Because I have to ask these questions. I don't know. Back in the day, people didn't really diagnose people on the spectrum, right? But I have to see the whole thing. We get him evaluated, it turns out, absolutely he's on the spectrum. So everything that the police officers assumed about him actually were true, but it's because he's on the spectrum, right? So, anyhow, then we actually had a medical examiner come and look at the body. That's a whole different thing, and say that this person died of positional asphyxia. But because the person was dead, and my client was kind of weird, definitely a murderer, right? Charged with $1 million bond. These are things we have to see the whole person. I know some of you are in administration, I know some of you are in nursing. But it's kind of the same thing, right? You have to see the person. We can't forget the people that we're seeing and we're representing. And so, in some ways, when Janice was talking and I was thinking about you all, I think they are aligned. I think when you say you want to help the person, right, the individual person, I think these things are really important that they do go kind of hand in hand. So, I don't know if that makes sense to you all.
Any questions?
Thank you so much. And we need questions.
Anything.
Because you know I'll point at you, so you might as well just go ahead and ask questions.
Everybody?
Did you say that, Charlie?
That's right. And I want to, like Lisa keeps saying, that it's similar. It's because they're at their most vulnerable. You know, when nurses and hospital administrators see people, it's because they're hurting, right, or something is wrong. When we see people, it's because they have been accused of something, but now they're living in a concrete cell, and many of them, the drug issues or the mental health issues. So we're seeing people at their most vulnerable and still, you know, putting ourselves out there to try to help them out of that spot, to try to mitigate the harm.
You had your hand up. Yes.
With the family, the boy who killed his father, have you had any follow-ups with him? How they're doing?
Yeah, so she's on our board. So I see the mom 4 times a year, more.
Yeah.
I put her on there on purpose because I didn't want to cut are the indigent poor people, right? Who are in jail. Why should we care about that? Like, we have all these things, right? So they want to always cut that budget first, and I make her stand there and tell her story, because I want them to see that person, right? And she's willing to, because she went for help. She went and asked for help. She did everything she possibly could. And I will tell you that my client, he's in Kerrville State Hospital. He has a life. He's medicated. He wants to help others now that he knows. And I always tell my kids this. On Mother's Day and on my birthday, my first text is always from him. He always texts me and says, "Thank you, saved my life." And I tell my kids, like, y'all suck. Like, he texted me from the hospital and you didn't even remember him. But I love him. I know that's probably a weird thing to say. But somebody hands you their life and they're their most vulnerable. And they trust you. And it's just like so many of you, that's an honor. I mean, I really believe that. And I love him. Like, if that makes sense, I'm proud of him, I'm proud of who he is now. And he has to live with that every single day of his life, and, you know, his mom does too, but, he helped inspire me to start this, so he always asks how the mental health public defender's office is going. Yeah, so I come all the time. That makes sense.
So I've heard a little bit about NHID and the work they do, and I know that there's also still such a huge need with homelessness and like all of these mental health issues in the community. What do you think is like the next step after having this office now? Like, what do you think are other resources that are needed to help combat these issues that you're facing?
I want Dennis to answer that, but I do want to say one thing. I want you guys to know this. This is San Patricio County, Aransas County, they don't have a public defender's office. So people that happen to be, and you know, if you have a mental health issue or whatever in those counties, like, this hasn't even started. So I want you to know that if you're in Taft, Texas, or Rockport, there is nothing like this. So not even that. There's all these places that aren't covered, right?
It's a really big problem, and I told my staff when we first started, I said, the first thing we need to do is solve homelessness. And you know, I'm a very positive person, so I really thought maybe we could come up with some ideas. But it's a complicated issue. But there is I don't know if it's new, but it is at least newly active homelessness task force that has some really caring people on it. And one of our social workers attends that meeting, the monthly meeting they have, and they seem to really be engaged with what are better things we can do, because what we're doing here isn't working. You know, we are basically cycling the same people in and out of jail for criminal trespass or other very low level crimes, and then, you know, when the judges think they've sat there long enough, they let them out and a new group comes in, and it's just this revolving door, and you begin to feel a little bit crazy. You know, I'm on this hamster wheel and I can't get off. I don't know what we can do differently. What we're trying to do is mitigate the harm and get them out of jail. But the reality is that, just like Lisa's client, the individual has to be interested in something different. And what we have to offer them in those few moments before they're released, they don't want. So we need to provide more housing, you know, different kinds of housing for people, and obviously easier access to the mental health and health care. And there are some new projects that are happening. I would say if you're interested in that, then there are probably lots of volunteer opportunities for participating in either the task force or with MHID. They have a homelessness program. And of course, what we're learning and the people that we're meeting through our work is helping inform what the needs are. So I think that every day that we're working with the homeless population, we're learning more things we can take to that task force and MHID to help come up with some solutions. But the answer is I don't know, and we have not solved homelessness yet, but it's still on the list.
But there are internships. I don't know if we all have internships.
Yes, they do.
The public defender's office has internships. Mental health public defender's office has internships. The DA's office, I'm not advocating for the DA's office, but they do. And maybe if you have an eye for mental health, hey, this could be a mental health case. That could be a good place for you, you know? the individual lawyers possibly have internships, so it's something to think about, but, if you need an internship, that would be, you're interested in this, in mental health, there's places for you, we'll take all of you. So.
More questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much.